Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into a case that is, well, it's just as heartbreaking as it is complex. The disappearance of 24-year-old Alexis Gabe in Antioch, California. It's this tragic puzzle made up of digital forensics, chilling family secrets, and just a completely desperate search for the truth. Today, we're going to unpack the exact chronological steps investigators took to actually unravel this mystery. So how does a 24-year-old woman just vanish into thin air, leaving behind this wild trail of digital clues and, honestly, some pretty chilling family secrets? It's the question that haunts literally every missing persons case, right? How does someone just disappear? Because it rarely happens without leaving a trace, especially today. Every step we take leaves a digital footprint. Alexis left behind a whole web of text messages, data pings, and a timeline that detectives had to piece together minute by agonizing minute. So we're going to retrace those exact steps today to understand exactly how the police zeroed in on their prime suspect.
Okay, to really grasp the stakes here, we have to look at the rigid timeline of January 26th. At 6:30 p.m., Alexis is caught on camera at a gas station. By 6:37 p.m., she arrives at her boyfriend Marshall Jones's house. 2 hours pass. At 8:30 p.m., her car is seen leaving, but it's taking a really unusual route. And then, at 8:42 p.m., a masked figure who is noticeably larger than Alexis steps out of her abandoned car. That 12-minute window, that is where absolutely everything changes.
Now, right before Alexis even got to the house, Marshall actually texted her, asking if she was still coming. Her reply was super brief. She just said, "I can only come by for a bit." But here's the thing Marshall didn't know. Alexis was actually planning to break up with him. That one detail completely changes the entire nature of her visit, and it perfectly explains why her family, who totally knew the, let's call it, dynamics of their relationship, immediately feared the absolute worst when she suddenly stopped answering her phone.
And you know what? Their fear was absolutely grounded in reality. Listen to this. This chilling quote came straight from one of Alexis's friends to the police right during the initial missing persons report. The friend explicitly said that Marshall had threatened to kill Alexis if they ever broke up. Boom! Instantly, the police focus shifted squarely onto Marshall Jones. I mean, he went from simply being the last person to see her alive to a very serious person of interest.
So naturally, detectives go to speak with Marshall. And this right here just brilliantly shows you the sheer power of modern forensics. Marshall claimed, "Oh, Alexis hung out with me and left around 9 p.m. to go smoke with her friend Maria." But the digital evidence pulled directly from Alexis's car's infotainment system, it told a completely different story. It tracked her car leaving Marshall's house and driving directly to the abandonment site 12 minutes before Marshall claimed she even left his driveway. I mean, his alibi was completely dismantled on day one.
But wait, beyond the digital lies, there was Marshall's highly disturbing behavior. When an officer calmly asked him a pretty routine question, just asking if he had a car so they could follow up with him later, Marshall responded with this bizarrely detached, wildly inappropriate comment about not being strapped down to the house like a slave. Instead of showing an ounce of concern for his missing girlfriend of 3 years, he's trying to make light of a gravely serious situation. For investigators, that was a massive flashing red flag.
Meanwhile, Alexis' family, they weren't just sitting around waiting, they were organizing their own relentless searches, and their immense pressure actually led to the discovery of Alexis' car parked in a residential cul-de-sac. But the state of the car was ominous, to say the least. The keys were literally still in the ignition, the doors were completely unlocked, and all her personal items were just gone. Finding the car like this escalated Marshall from a mere person of interest straight into the prime suspect in her disappearance.
And the picture of a cover-up begins to build pretty much immediately. When detectives visit Marshall's house, he subtly, kind of steers them away from searching his attic. Then, he actually follows the police to the station in his stepdad's car, a car he later admits he and Alexis used. But when he gets there, he straight up refuses to let the cops search under the blankets in the back, claiming they just used it to go to the drive-in. Let that sink in. He literally drove a potential crime scene right to the police station and then just slipped away.
To make matters even worse for Marshall, his whole web of laws just kept unraveling. He had confidently told detectives that his stepdad, Leslie, was home when Alexis was there. But when the police went and directly questioned Leslie, he flatly denied it. He stated he never saw Alexis or her car that entire night. This direct, undeniable contradiction from the homeowner proved Marshall was fabricating his timeline, and it shifted the whole investigation into a much darker phase.
And then came a massive breakthrough. You remember that masked figure who abandoned Alexis's car? Well, they didn't just disappear into thin air.
Investigators tracked this figure, who, again, was noticeably larger with a very masculine build, via CCTV cameras, just calmly walking for over a mile. And where exactly did this figure walk to? Directly to the home of Alicia Clark, Marshall's mother. Yeah, this shocking twist triggered an emergency SWAT raid right on Marshall's home.
During that February 1st raid, the discoveries they made were chilling. Officers immediately noticed the distinct, unmistakable odor of a decomposing body. They found small traces of dried blood, they noted a completely missing shower curtain, and the heavy smell of bleach. A canine unit even started clawing frantically at the wall in Marshall's bedroom, indicating a strong scent leading right up to the attic. But here's the incredibly frustrating part for investigators. Without a body, these findings were legally inconclusive.
So now Marshall is on the run, but investigators decided to use his own electronic footprint against him. They got a real-time ping on his phone hitting in Vacaville, right at his sister Ariana's house. Ariana actually cooperated and gave the police Marshall's brand new phone number. And guess what happened when detectives pinged that new number? It led them right back to Marshall's mother, Alicia, the exact same woman who had explicitly claimed she hadn't seen him.
Now, while Marshall's mother and stepfather were being super evasive, his own sister offered some brutal honesty. She told detectives straight up that Marshall seemed way more upset about the breakup itself than the fact that Alexis was actually missing. And she stated irrefutably that her brother had sociopathic and narcissistic tendencies. This kind of insight gave detectives a crystal clear psychological profile of the man they were hunting down.
Armed with this new phone ping data, police executed an emergency raid on Marshall's mother's house. But Marshall had vanished again. However, when they asked Alicia where the phone was, she directed them upstairs. They found it hidden inside a green Hawaiian shirt tucked away in her closet. But unfortunately, when forensics actually analyzed the device, they found it had been wiped completely, 100% clean.
And during her interrogation, Alicia's demeanor was just oddly defensive. Instead of showing any real concern for Alexis, she vehemently defended Marshall's character. She was even bragging about him buying Alexis chocolates. When the police pushed her about the harsh reality of human trafficking or foul play, she just dismissively said, "You can't just snatch up a 24-year-old 170-pound female." She basically demanded the police prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, clearly protecting her son at absolutely all costs.
But the truth always has a way of surfacing, doesn't it? Months later, delayed CCTV footage from Alicia's house was finally recovered by investigators. And man, this footage was a grim turning point. It showed large plastic bags being moved out of the house. Investigators strongly suspected that these bags contained Alexis's dismembered remains, and that Marshall's mother wasn't just aware of what happened, but was actively helping him stay one step ahead of the law.
Following that initial raid back in February, the trail frustratingly went cold for months. It wasn't until June 1st, by using travel records and anonymous tips, that they finally tracked Marshall down to an apartment in Kent, Washington. And tragically, it wouldn't be until November 3rd of that year that the final devastating piece of this whole puzzle would be found.
Let's go back to June 1st. A task force arrived at those Skyview apartments up in Washington to serve a murder warrant and finally arrest Marshall. But Marshall made an irreversible decision. He opened the front door and immediately charged at the officers wielding a large kitchen knife. He was fatally shot by police right there at the scene. And Marshall's death meant one very painful thing. He would never sit in a courtroom, and he would never face a jury for what he did to Alexis.
For Alexis's family, the agonizing wait for any kind of physical closure ended in November. A local resident who was just out using a metal detector in the remote Sierra foothills of Plymouth, California, stumbled upon scattered human remains. A forensic odontologist used dental records to confirm the absolute devastating truth. It was Alexis Gabe. The monster had indeed discarded her exactly as detectives had feared from the very beginning.
But you know, the story doesn't just cleanly end there. And this brings us to a really frustrating legal boundary. By definition, an accomplice is someone who knowingly assists in a crime. But despite the CCTV footage, the wiped phone hidden in the closet, and all the outright lies, there just wasn't enough concrete physical proof to firmly charge Marshall's mother or his relatives as accomplices in a court of law. They were temporarily detained, sure, but ultimately they were released. Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought. Alexis's family continues to fight to this day, launching petitions and demanding accountability. Because if the prime suspect takes his secrets to the grave and the people who seemingly helped him cover his tracks walk completely free due to the limitations of our justice system, is justice truly served?
It's a heavy, heavy question and a stark reminder of the complexities of the law. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you next time.